On the 27th of March, 1977, KLM Flight 4805 and Pan Am Flight 1736 were approaching the Canary Islands. Both were a Boeing 747 passenger aircraft, and both were bound for Las Palmas Airport on Gran Canaria. Before they could land, a bomb exploded inside the Las Palmas passenger terminal. Authorities evacuated the building and closed the airport because of a threat that another device might explode. Incoming flights were diverted to Los Rodeos on the neighboring island of Tenerife. Los Rodeos was not prepared to receive so many large aircraft at once. Diverted traffic crowded its parking area, including the KLM and Pan Am 747s. An airport intended as a temporary diversion point had become congested. When Las Palmas reopened, both crews prepared to complete the short flight to Gran Canaria. Pan Am was ready to leave, but KLM blocked its route from the parking area. The KLM passengers had been allowed to disembark during the delay. KLM then decided to refuel at Los Rodeos, loading 55,500 liters. Investigators later treated the refueling as an indirect factor, not the fundamental cause of the accident. It extended the delay while conditions at the airport continued to change. Tenerife and Gran Canaria lie close together, and the remaining flight would have taken about 25 minutes. Investigators believed KLM took on enough fuel to avoid another refueling stop at Las Palmas, allowing the aircraft to return to Amsterdam directly. The refueling kept both 747s on the crowded ground at Los Rodeos for longer. By the time KLM requested permission to taxi, the normal route to the runway was obstructed. Aircraft parked on the congested apron prevented use of the parallel taxiway. The tower therefore had to move departing traffic along the runway itself. At 4:56 in the afternoon, KLM requested permission to taxi. The tower instructed the aircraft to enter runway 12, continue to the far end and turn around. This maneuver, known as backtracking, would position KLM in the opposite direction on runway 30, ready for departure. The initial exchange was not immediately clear. KLM first understood that it might leave the runway by a taxiway and return at the departure end. The controller corrected that understanding and instructed the crew to continue straight along the runway before turning around. KLM reported that it was on the runway and proceeded toward the far end. Behind it, Pan Am was also cleared to enter the runway. Its crew was instructed to follow the same route, then leave at the third taxiway on the left. Once Pan Am was clear, the runway would be available for KLM's departure. This was an unusual arrangement created by the congestion. Two Boeing 747s would use the active runway as a taxi route, one behind the other, before departing in the opposite direction. The reconstructed movements show the plan. KLM traveled along the runway first. Pan Am followed. At the far end, KLM would turn through 180 degrees and line up for takeoff. Pan Am was supposed to leave the runway before KLM began its takeoff roll. The movements were coordinated by radio. The tower needed to know when KLM had completed its turn and when Pan Am had reached the correct exit. Both crews needed to understand which taxiway the controller meant and whether the runway was occupied. At 1 minute before 5, Pan Am contacted the tower to confirm that it had been instructed to taxi along the runway. The controller affirmed the instruction and again told the crew to leave at the third exit on the left. Inside the Pan Am cockpit, uncertainty emerged over which intersection counted as the third. The crew discussed whether the controller might have meant the first available exit, then decided to ask again. The problem was not simply counting intersections. The taxiways left the runway at different angles, and the crew questioned whether the earlier turn could be negotiated by an aircraft as large as a 747. Pan Am asked the tower to confirm the third intersection. The controller repeated the instruction emphatically, the third one. The crew counted the exits as the aircraft continued along the runway. Ahead of them, KLM reached the far end and began the 180-degree turn that would align it with runway 30. Pan Am was still taxiing toward its exit. The sequence now depended on three facts remaining clear to everyone involved. KLM had reached takeoff position. Pan Am had not reported leaving the runway, and the tower had not issued KLM a takeoff clearance. At the same time, low cloud was beginning to move across Los Rodeos. The shared runway that had solved the airport's congestion problem was becoming increasingly difficult to see. Pan Am Flight 1736 continued along the runway behind KLM. The tower had instructed its crew to leave at the third intersection on the left, but identifying that exit was becoming a problem. One intersection required a turn of about 90 degrees. Another met the runway at a shallower angle. Inside the Pan Am cockpit, the crew discussed whether a Boeing 747 could negotiate the sharper turn, and whether the controller's count referred to taxiway Charlie 3 or Charlie 4. At about 5:03 in the afternoon, Pan Am asked for confirmation. The controller repeated that the aircraft should take the third intersection. The crew counted the exits while continuing forward, but the taxiway geometry remained difficult to reconcile with the instruction. Pan Am did not leave the runway at the third intersection. The Spanish accident board later listed this as a contributing factor, while also limiting its importance. The crew never reported that the runway was clear. On the contrary, Pan Am told the tower that it was still taxiing there. Ahead, KLM reached the end of the runway. The crew turned the 747 through 180 degrees and aligned it with runway 30. KLM now faced back along the pavement it had just used. Pan Am was somewhere ahead, moving in the same direction as the planned takeoff. Low cloud was crossing Los Rodeos. 17 minutes before the collision, reported runway visibility had been between 2 and 3 kilometers. 12 minutes later, it had fallen to about 300 meters. The changes were rapid and uneven. From the control tower, the aircraft taxiing on the runway disappeared from view. The two flight crews could not see each other through the cloud. The controller therefore had to rely on radio reports to determine where each aircraft was. KLM was positioned for departure. Pan Am was still searching for the correct exit. The tower knew Pan Am had been instructed to leave the runway, but it had not received confirmation that the aircraft had done so. Shortly before 5:05, the tower informed both crews that the runway centerline lights were out of service. KLM acknowledged the message. Pan Am also acknowledged it and discussed the visibility required for departure without those lights. Pan Am's immediate task was still to leave the runway. The crew identified one intersection but rejected it as the sharply angled turn. They continued toward the next exit, which appeared easier for a 747 to negotiate. KLM was stationary at the departure end, facing down runway 30. Pan Am remained on the same runway, obscured by low cloud and moving away from KLM toward an exit. KLM still needed two distinct clearances. An air traffic control clearance would specify the route to be flown after departure. A takeoff clearance would authorize the aircraft to begin its takeoff roll. Receiving the first did not provide the second. At 5:05 and 41 seconds, The KLM first officer reminded the captain that they did not yet have their air traffic control clearance. The captain acknowledged this and told him to request it. KLM then transmitted that it was ready for takeoff and waiting for its air traffic control clearance. The tower responded with the departure route. The aircraft was cleared toward the Papa beacon, with instructions governing its climb and heading after takeoff. This was a route clearance, not permission to begin moving. But while the first officer was reading it back, the captain opened the throttles. Pan Am had not reported leaving the runway. The tower had not said the runway was clear. KLM had not been cleared for takeoff. Yet the aircraft had begun to accelerate. As KLM accelerated, its first officer completed the departure clearance readback with an ambiguous phrase, "We are now at takeoff." The tower controller did not understand this to mean that the aircraft had already started its takeoff roll. Investigators who later heard the recording also found the wording difficult to interpret. The tower responded, "Okay," followed by an instruction to stand by for takeoff because the controller would call them. At nearly the same moment, Pan Am transmitted that it was still taxiing on the runway. The two radio transmissions overlapped. In the KLM cockpit, the interference produced a whistling sound lasting several seconds. The crucial messages from the tower and Pan Am were not received with the clarity they required. KLM continued accelerating. The tower then instructed Pan Am to report when the runway was clear. Pan Am replied that it would do so. This later exchange was audible in the KLM cockpit. The KLM flight engineer reacted. He asked whether Pan Am had left the runway. The captain did not initially understand the question, so the flight engineer asked again, "Was Pan Am not clear?" The captain answered that it was. According to the Spanish investigation, the captain's authority and professional standing may have made it difficult for the other crew members to challenge him further. The report treated this as a possible influence, not a directly observable motive. Neither the first officer nor the flight engineer raised another objection. Pan Am had still not reported clear. KLM was continuing its takeoff roll. The aircraft were moving toward each other through low cloud, with only seconds remaining. This image is a CGI reconstruction, not a photograph. Its creator reduced the fog so that both aircraft would remain visible. In the actual conditions, the crews did not have this clear, elevated view. Investigators determined that the Pan Am crew saw KLM approaching through the cloud about 9.5 seconds before impact. The Pan Am captain applied power and attempted to turn the aircraft off the runway. The KLM crew also saw Pan Am ahead. KLM attempted to lift off before reaching it, but there was too little distance left to avoid contact. At 5:06 and 47 seconds in the afternoon, the aircraft collided. The collision came about 13 seconds after the KLM flight engineer had questioned whether Pan Am was still on the runway. It occurred less than a minute after the KLM captain began advancing the throttles without takeoff clearance. The final sequence contained several warnings. The tower had instructed KLM to stand by. Pan Am had stated that it was still taxiing on the runway. The tower then asked Pan Am to report when clear, and Pan Am acknowledged that it would. The flight engineer heard enough to question whether the runway was occupied. None of those warnings stopped the takeoff roll. The collision was not produced by the fog alone, the missed taxiway alone, or one ambiguous phrase alone. The official investigation would distinguish the fundamental cause from the conditions that contributed to it. Before those findings could be examined, the scale of the human loss had to be established. All 248 passengers and crew, aboard KLM Flight 4805 were killed. On Pan Am Flight 1736, 335 people died, 61 survived. The total death toll was 583. The Federal Aviation Administration identifies Tenerife as the deadliest accident in aviation history. This image is computer artwork, not a record of the impact. It cannot show the individual experiences inside either aircraft. The verified figures establish the scale without requiring graphic description. The Pan Am survivors emerged from an aircraft devastated by collision and fire. Everyone aboard KLM was lost. Investigators now had to determine how two airworthy aircraft, operating under tower control, had been allowed to collide on an active runway. The Spanish Accident Board identified the KLM captain's actions as the fundamental cause. The board found that he began takeoff without clearance. He did not obey the tower's instruction to stand by for takeoff. He continued after Pan Am reported that it was still on the runway. And when the flight engineer questioned whether Pan Am had cleared, the captain answered that it had. Those findings did not mean that the accident had only one relevant condition. The investigation separated the fundamental cause from factors that may have influenced the sequence. One was mounting time pressure. Dutch crew duty regulations had recently changed. The rules were strict, difficult to calculate in the cockpit, and carried penalties if the permitted duty period was exceeded. During the delay, the KLM captain contacted company operations in Amsterdam to clarify whether the flight could still be completed within the limit. The investigation considered uncertainty over duty time an important psychological factor. It concluded that concern about further delay may have influenced the captain's decisions. This was presented as a possible influence, not proof of a private motive. The weather was another contributing condition. Low cloud moved across the airport, causing sudden changes in visibility. The crews and controller lost direct sight of the traffic on the runway. The investigation concluded that the deteriorating conditions increased workload and may have narrowed the KLM crew's attention as they prepared for departure. Radio communication also failed at a critical moment. The KLM first officer ended the departure clearance readback with the words, "We are now at takeoff." The controller did not understand that the aircraft had started moving. His response began with "OK" before he instructed the crew to stand by. The tower's instruction and Pan Am's warning that it remained on the runway were transmitted at nearly the same time. The resulting interference reduced their clarity in the KLM cockpit. The board identified the language itself as inadequate. A departure clearance described the route to be flown after takeoff. It was not a takeoff clearance. Yet the words used during the exchange did not make that distinction unmistakable to everyone involved. Pan Am's failure to leave at the third intersection was also listed as a contributing factor. The board said the crew should have clarified whether the controller meant taxiway Charlie 3 or Charlie 4. But it also judged this issue to be of limited relevance because Pan Am never reported the runway clear. Instead, the crew twice stated that it was still taxiing there. Unusual congestion created the conditions for the runway backtracking procedure. The bomb at Las Palmas had diverted more traffic to Los Rodeos than its apron could handle. Parked aircraft blocked the parallel taxiway, forcing both 747s to use the runway for ground movement. The board treated the bombing and KLM's refueling as indirect factors. They helped create delay and congestion, but they were not substitutes for the fundamental finding. KLM began takeoff without authorization, while Pan Am remained on the runway. The investigation produced 3 central recommendations. First, crews and controllers must comply exactly with instructions and clearances. Second, aeronautical language must be standard, concise, and unambiguous. Third, the word takeoff should not be used in an air traffic control route clearance. It should be reserved for the separate clearance that authorizes an aircraft to begin its takeoff roll, with adequate time between the two messages. No airworthiness directives were issued as a result of the collision. The aircraft themselves were not identified as the source of the failure. The accident was treated as operational, a breakdown involving decisions, communications, runway occupancy, and crew coordination. Tenerife also became an enduring reference point in the study of runway incursions and cockpit authority. The Federal Aviation Administration later classified the accident under both ground incursion risk and crew resource management. The flight engineer had identified the unresolved danger and questioned the captain. The exchange demonstrated why recognizing a problem is not always enough. A cockpit must allow safety concerns to be stated clearly, understood and pursued until the danger is resolved. In August 2007, the Federal Aviation Administration launched a program addressing runway incursion risks. Its official review says the Tenerife disaster was one of the events that helped shape that initiative. The safety legacy is therefore specific. Separate route clearance from takeoff clearance. Reserve critical words for critical instructions. Confirm runway occupancy. Use standard language. And ensure that professional hierarchy does not silence a warning when an aircraft's safety is in doubt. Those lessons were written in procedures and training. The human cost remained in the lives lost, the people who survived, and the families who carried the consequences beyond Lowe's rodeos. At Westgard in Amsterdam, a memorial carries the inscription, Tenerife, 27th of March, 1977. The words mark a precise date, but the consequences did not end there. Families in the Netherlands and the United States faced the loss of 583 people. 61 survivors of Pan Am Flight 1736 carried their own experience of the collision forward. The memorial was photographed decades after the disaster. Flowers rest on its stone surface, but the image does not record who placed them or on what occasion. What it establishes is continued remembrance in Amsterdam. Nearby plaques preserve individual names. They return the disaster from totals and technical findings to the people represented by those numbers. The available visual record does not provide their biographies, so none should be invented. The names themselves are the evidence. Each belonged to a person whose death affected families, friends, and communities far beyond Tenerife. For many years, remembrance remained divided among those different communities. On the 30th anniversary, the 27th of March, 2007, the first official international memorial service for the disaster was held in Tenerife. The commemoration had two parts. A memorial service took place at the Auditorio de Tenerife in Santa Cruz. An international monument was then unveiled on Mount Mesa Mota in the municipality of San Cristobal de la Laguna. Dutch and American relatives attended, along with survivors, Spanish emergency workers, and others connected to the disaster. The monument was designed by Dutch artist Rudy van de Wint. Named Stairway to Heaven, it takes the form of an 18-meter spiral staircase. Its steps rise upward and then end abruptly. Remembrance also reached Orange County, California, where another memorial records the disaster. Like the monument in Amsterdam, it places the event within a community that continued to live with its consequences. The memorials do not explain the accident. That work belongs to the flight recorders, radio transcripts, airfield diagrams, and official findings. Nor do the technical findings replace the memorials. One preserves the chain of events, the other preserves the reason that chain must be understood accurately. Tenerife's documented safety legacy is equally concrete. Takeoff must never begin without an unmistakable clearance. Route instructions and takeoff authorization must remain separate. Critical radio language must be concise and standardized. A report that a runway is occupied must be resolved before an aircraft moves. And a crew member's safety concern must be pursued, regardless of rank. These principles cannot undo what happened at Lowe's rodeos. Their purpose is prevention, to stop ambiguity, assumption, and authority from combining again on an occupied runway. The final record of Tenerife is therefore held in two forms. It survives in procedures designed to protect future flights, and in memorials bearing the names of those procedures came too late to save.